I'm a member of the P&I World Pension Summit Advisory Board, and I'm delighted to be interviewing Professor Annamaria Lusardi. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Don. Very happy to be here today.
You know, as far as I'm concerned, you are the world's foremost expert on financial literacy. I know your background includes being a very distinguished university professor at George Washington University, which, by the way, is the university from which my daughter graduated many years ago. And as well, you are the academic director of the Global Financial Literary Excellence Center. Your doctorate is from Princeton, not to mention honorary doctorates, and among so many other activities, you chaired the Financial Literacy Experts PISA Committee, PISA being the global test of the ability of 15-year-olds. You have done everything in this field. You have been quoted by newspapers and TV. You have written books and papers that have been cited literally thousands of times. In fact, I saw a list of citations and you were among the top 2% of economists. So that is an amazing professional background. But personally, I think of you as a charming and friendly person. So tell our audience a little bit about your personal background and what got you interested in financial literacy.
Well, I want to start by not only thanking you for this introduction, but for this great compliment. I take the last one as a great achievement. As an academic, I don't get to, I don't receive these comments or this compliment as often. So thank you very much. And I think if I had to describe, what brought me into here, I have to say I always had an interest implicitly in financial literacy, and for which I mean try to understand the world around me. And so I remember myself going to the farmer's market, as a young person, and try to understand, what motivates, what are the meaning of these numbers, what motivate people to make these transactions. So maybe there was that curiosity early on. And I think what really brought me into the field of financial literacy is my work that started at Princeton, for example, looking at saving and consumption behavior. And I was very lucky that my advisor was Angus Deaton. So, it was an amazing work already there, being able to work with somebody which has that type of knowledge and understanding. And also feeling already right there that there has to be something more that we need to understand, because people that look very, very similar, for example, in terms of income, education, would end up accumulating vastly different amount of wealth. And I always thought that knowledge and what you know about finance really do matter, and that was my intuition. And I spent many, many years later on to show that original and simple intuition was also true empirically, and that financial literacy matters enormously in terms of accumulating wealth, saving for pension, saving for retirement, and many other decisions that people make.
So let's expand on that a little bit. What would be different if the world were more financially literate? In other words, what are the benefits to individuals, to their employers, to the world?
I think there would be many, many benefits. And we would be, first of all, happier. People, in case you think that money doesn't bring you happiness, I think actually money does. And it's not just money per se, is being able to be in control of your finances, be able to have that confidence and knowledge in dealing with the decisions that we are asked to make today. And I think they make an enormous difference. I think, for example, first of all, people would be better able to decide for their own future, for their own pension. I think that young people would be better able to navigate this complex world around them. And I actually think that many groups would be less vulnerable. And I think the crisis has unveiled this vulnerability. And I think we would be also suffering from less anxiety. So many people have anxiety resulting from financial worries. And so I think there are huge benefits at the macro level. I think actually countries can even grow better, because I think we could channel savings into productive activities. I think we have considered too little how important the individual behavior is, and how much it matters, not just for themselves, but also for the economy and for the macro economy.
So let's take that one a step further and see what we can do. Our audience is in the business of pensions in different roles, and then as human beings, their parents, their grandparents. How can they help the young ones in their families to be more financially literate? And if by chance the kids then get into work without an adequate background in financial literacy, what can employers do to help? Because this is clearly such a good thing.
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, I always suggest to any parents and grandparents to talk to their children and grandchildren about money. It's time to do so. While in the past, potentially money was not considered a good topic, or maybe a topic that you talk to, today we need to do so. Mm-hmm. It's fashionable, it's smart, it is the good thing to do. And I would say give a piggy bank to a child, and you will transform that child instantly into a savvy banker. I've seen this done many times. People think that children are not interested in money, and nothing could be further from the truth. I think, we need to have that, instill that easiness of speaking about money, and make sure that children become familiar with money, because otherwise I think they will become familiar about stress about money, or they might have distorted view. And so let's teach them, the things that they are going to be dealing with. And early on, with the proper, in a sense, education. You don't need to talk about pension to a 2 years old, but there are many things that a two years old, want to know. And we should also remind them that, the fact that we take money from an ATM doesn't mean that walls are producing money. And that money comes from somewhere, and we need to give them a sense of a budget constraint. But I also think that parents and grandparents and citizens in general should be advocates for financial literacy. For example, in their school, I think there is an important role of schools here, because not everybody, is able to receive an education from parents or grandparents. And I think if provided in school, we can give access to everybody, and we can provide a more rigorous educations as well. I don't want to teach Shakespeare to young people, but it would be good if they really learn it and see how elaborate or beautiful it is. And the same thing should be about money. There is some part that, I think is really designed for teachers. But as people age, we can't just provide everything in the schools. And I think there is a very important role for the employer. And I don't think that employers are generous here to just offer financial education. First of all, I think they would show they care, but I think it is the profitable thing to do for employers as well. And let me tell you that we have done each year a survey, of a personal finance survey. It's called PFIN survey, the Personal Finance Index. And when we measure what people know about these topics that we are making decision about every day now, in the most recent years, we have asked how many hours people spend in dealing with personal finance issues, and how many of these hours are at work. So actually, not only people spend many hours, and in fact, almost a day a week in dealing with personal finance issue, but people with lower financial literacy spend a day and a half a week dealing with this personal finance issue, and many of these hours are at work. So, I think like if you if the cost of your personal finance is less than 4 or 5 hours of your employer, it's very profitable for employer to provide financial education, because financially fit employees are also more productive employees.
So that's a clear win-win all around. That's
Clear win-win.
fantastic. Oh, that alone makes this whole thing worthwhile. Thank you. But I know our audience has some questions that I got before preparing for this interview. So if I may, let me ask you about some specific angles. One is about how debt late in life is remaking retirement and what can be done about it. So it's a very specific issue.
Yes, it's a very specific issue. It's so difficult that Olivia Mitchell and I edited a book about it. So this is something that we had to notice in our data. And we wanted to study, first of all, because often we think of savings. So we are only looking at the asset side of the balance sheet, but not looking at the liability side of the balance sheet. And then when we started to look at the data closely, we realized just one of the things that has changed, just how much more retirees were carrying debt into retirement. And not just a small amount of debt. Often people add half of the mortgage to pay off at retirement. In a low interest rate environment, of course, carrying debt might be less of a problem. But I think, we need to be a little bit careful about this, because one of the problem about debt is, once interest rates start going up, then you have to service the debt. And while mortgages were not necessarily our concern, because this is also a collateralized asset and so on, we also saw that people were carrying a lot of other type of debt into retirement, including credit card. And there were signs of potential financial distress already. For example, in one of our recent paper, we showed that people were older, right? People already into retirement or close to retirement were contacted by debt collector. So in other words, people were carrying debt and they were not able to pay it off. And also we saw that we asked this simple question to evaluate whether that was a problem, and ask respondent directly where they think they were carrying too much debt. And about a third of people close to retirement said yes to that questions. So I think, indeed, maybe the debt part of what we see people carrying into retirement might eventually influence retirement, because perhaps if people have to service the debt, they might postpone their retirement. And there is an indication in our data as well that this might also be happening. So, in a sense, my concern is that, we need to be careful. It's so easy now to, in a sense, borrow. And there are so many sources of that. And I worry a little bit even about the young generation who start their economic life in debt. And even this older generation, some of them were carrying student loan into retirement. So I think, that is becoming an important part of our financial life, so much so that it might even influence retirement. We should be at the peak of that wealth accumulation back then. But, if people are having problem with that, then there is something that that needs to be taken care of in their personal finances.
This is so true. I know people of my generation and the next one who are still carrying this kind of debt, including student loans, etc. So thank you for that. So as we think of investor education and investor protection as we come out of this pandemic,
right.
and any thoughts on where that may go?
These are such important questions. So first of all, let me just say, investor education and investor protection go hand in hand. So they are not a substitute, they are a complement. And a lot of the people, as they become more financially literate or they acquire more investor knowledge, they also are demanding more protection, because some of these in a sense, situation can be quite difficult. But, in a time like a crisis, financial knowledge and literacy becomes even more important. I always say sailing lessons show all of their worth when there is a storm. And so, here is another situation where, you can better navigate and you can better know what to do if you have that basic knowledge. And the other thing, which I think is, again, education and protection are so important, is that during the financial crisis that we see a lot of evidence of scams, and so much so during this crisis where we have to shift so suddenly to technology. And now with technology, we can do operations so much quicker, but unfortunately, we can make even bigger mistakes. And we have had a lot more instances as well of scams and fraud. So, we really need to make sure that people are knowledgeable and they are well protected as well.
Yes. Let me ask you one more question before I ask, is there anything else you want to add? And that is about the stock market participation of women. I've read that financial literacy among women is lower than among men. So talk a little bit about this.
I'm so glad you asked this question, because we have spent many, many years looking into this topic, in particular the gender difference in financial literacy. And I have to say, strikingly, we see a gender difference in financial literacy around the world. And this has consequences when we look at in which way financial literacy matter. And in particular, we look at one important behavior that people, I think, identify with finance. People identify finance with investing, and they identify with investing in the stock market.
Yeah.
And so we, in our recent paper, we try to understand whether financial literacy affects stock market participation. And I have to say, it really does. So, it's important because, in other words, if women do not have enough financial literacy, they are going to be held back. They are not going to participate in the financial market, in the stock market in particular, which is an important way to build wealth. And we wanted to understand this a little deeper as well, which is, about what explains, first of all, this gender gap. Why do women know less than men? I think we all realize that we all need these skills. And when we look deeper at the way in which women answer questions, we realize that they disproportionately answer the financial literacy question, not incorrectly, but they answer disproportionately with "I do not know."
Okay.
And we look deeper into this "I do not know" and realize it is a symptom of lack of confidence. And we could even measure how much of that gender gap was a difference in knowledge and a difference in confidence. And we estimated that a third of the gender gap in financial literacy is confidence. And when we look at the participation in the stock market, we saw that both characteristics, in other words, the fact that women not only have lower knowledge, but lower confidence, matter for the participation in the stock market. And so I believe that, what the US did, which is put a statue of a little girl in front of the New York Stock Exchange, is indeed a good idea. So in case people do not know, there is a fearless girl, is a little statue in front of it was put in front of the Raging Bull in New York City, the New York Stock Exchange, and now the little girl is in front of the New York Stock Exchange. And I think that symbol is absolutely right, that we need to encourage women and girls to be fearless.
I remember seeing that photograph when it happened, and I remember thinking, this is just wonderful in so many ways. This is just a perfect picture. This is terrific. Anything you want to add that I haven't dealt with?
Thank you. I want to speak about a topic which I think has been very clear during the crisis, and which is inequality. Yes. I think the crisis has not just shown how unequal we are when it comes to dealing with the shock of disproportion, but it has left us even more unequal than when we were hit by this crisis. And so this is more than ever a time, I think, to do work and in particular to help the group which are more vulnerable. And another pieces of research that I want to show, and this was done before the financial crisis, it was just to show also how much financial literacy can be linked to inequality. In other words, I really do think that moving forward, we need to democratize knowledge. We need to democratize financial literacy. It shouldn't just be concentrated on a small group of people, which are privileged one. And this is what happens when you don't put it in the school, when you don't make it available to everybody. Is only the affluent family, the college-educated white families, will often just provide that information to their male children. And so such a large group of society is going to be left behind, and not being financially literate today is a major disadvantage. And one of the things we have documented is that financial literacy acted as a shield to protect people a little bit more against being hit by the shocks also of this financial crisis. So not just it helps people navigate the world around them, but it helps them being better protected, and it helps us be less unequal. Because managing, being able to manage your wealth has so many benefits, and everybody should be able to share and enjoy those benefits.
Yes, and if we had this, we would have not only greater equality financially, we'd have greater emotional security too.
Exactly.
And that would be just wonderful. You have given us all terrific wisdom and advice. What's the best piece of advice you were ever given?
The best piece of advice that I was given, and that I would also give to others, is don't waste time. Time is truly money. And what I mean here is that, it's very important in finance to start early. I tell my students that when they sleep, interest compounding is at work. And, that they should start as early as possible. This is how you accumulate wealth. Starting as early as possible, use the time well. And this is important because we all have this resource, time. And, but young people are very rich of this resource. And so, that's how we have to use our time well. So my first recommendation is use the time to start early, but also use the time well in a sense of take good care of your finances. Spend a little bit of time. It doesn't take a lot of time to take care of your finances in the same way in which you take care of your health, you take care of your children, you maybe take care of your garden, right? You take care of your car. So your finances need a constant attention. Just spend 10 minutes a week taking care of your finances, and so you'll do better. You'll be more financially secure. You'll be more financially confident. Time is really important, and we need to spend it well. So that would be my suggestions. But I then also want to, I know you are another big expert in this field. So Don, let me ask this suggestion too, because I also know that that's what people would like to hear.
I asked my wife, who knows me better than myself and who is really the bright one in the family kind of thing. And I said, if I ask you, what are the kind of rules or advice that I live by? She said, it's not on the financial side. She said, both of us do something, you keep talking about it. And she reminded me that it's a little saying that rhymes. It's, we give our kids two precious things. One is roots, the other wings. And I remember when I first heard that, thinking, giving our kids roots will be easy, giving them wings will be difficult. But part of giving them wings, it seems to me, is to give them the ability to fly, and giving them an education that includes the financial side is just so important. Anna, this has been an absolute pleasure. I'm so glad. It's been such a long time since we've talked. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I know our audience will, and I hope we'll see you on October the 12th to 14th at The Hague at the P&I World Pension Summit. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation a lot too. And thank you for inviting me to join you today.